Hello and welcome to React for Retail. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to settle in. We're going to get started here right away. So we're Rangle.io, based out of Toronto, Canada, and we're going to talk to you about, at a high level, about some of the technology, but really about some of the business implications, specifically for retail, of using React and how it can help solve some digital and product problems that we've seen over our experience in the last couple of years. So who are we? Rangle.io is a JavaScript consultancy and development shop. We work specifically on front-end technologies using products such as React and AngularJS. And we work a lot with retail companies to help them optimize their digital strategy and help to implement their omnichannel solutions across the board. So who's going to be talking today? So our founder and CEO, Nick Van Weerdenberg, he's going to be kind of leading the first part of the discussion that really is going to focus around kind of some of the current problems for retail and some of the solutions that retailers can use when building user interfaces and problems specific to dealing with single-page applications. Nick has well over 15 years experiences in software. He's had a lot of different roles over the years, working with companies like Nike and Victoria's Secret. He founded the company about almost 4 years ago. He was employee number 1, and we're really fortunate that he's been able to grow the company to where it's at today. I'm who's speaking. My name is Douglas Riches. I'm the Director of Solutions Architecture. So I have a similar kind of background to Nick, maybe a little less time, only 1 or 2 years less. And I've had a similar background working over the years for our current clients, such as Aldo Shoes and Progressive Insurance. I've also had the fortune to work with companies like NASA as well, implementing their front-end solutions. So, Rangle.io, like I mentioned before, is really an end-to-end partner that can help you innovate and move forward and really kind of, breach that the digital barriers that might be challenging your business. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but we often say that too many retailers today really just treat their digital and web experiences like plumbing. Something that's there, but not really utilizing it to its full potential. So a lot of the work that we do is to help you have that strategy to move forward, to really be groundbreaking in retail, as well as having fantastic customer experiences. So with all that said, I'm going to pass it over to Nick. He's going to talk about some of the retail challenges that retailers are facing today.
All right. So yeah, thanks, Doug. Thanks everyone for joining. So I spent actually quite a few years as a solution architect in the retail industry and worked in a lot of companies in North America shifting over to fast fashion. And I think we're seeing a very similar thing now in the digital space, where we have to move really quick, we have to be adaptable, we have to learn, and we have to shorten our cycle time, because with long cycle times, you can't plan for 18 months out and build the right thing anymore. So how do you fix that? And how does that sort of provide benefit to retail? So, from a retail landscape, everything's going digital, but technology keeps changing so fast, and there's new ways of interacting, new customer experiences, and it's very hard to react when you have a 5 or 10 year build cycle. Customers are now getting new experiences, high-touch, brick-and-mortar experiences, getting connected to the omnichannel experience. Like, so many users do research, they want to learn about the product, they're getting used to a very data-centric sort of retail experience. So it's your brand and the data combining. They want personalized e-commerce because then obviously it makes it more impactful to them. And so you can have that one-on-one relationship. And the thing is, like with the technology challenges, more nimble startups and disruptive competitors fill market needs before large retailers can respond. There's segmentation in markets. You have one customer base, you lose them to a new startup, things are changing fast. And how can you address that? And the 5 to 10 year build doesn't work, and there's a better way of doing it. The challenges with traditional e-commerce is outdated on launch. I mean, that is so common, but the inflexibility on launch is even more detrimental It's overwhelming complexity. There's multiple devices, regions, languages, and it's much harder now than it was 10 years ago in the sense that there are so many more devices and regions and expectations. Table stakes are much higher from an e-commerce perspective. E-commerce is now a critical part of your brand, whereas before it was just another channel to your client that your existing brand reached. The bureaucracy that emerges makes it impossible to respond to customers or market feedback because of that complexity. And a lot of the value that can be delivered in e-commerce today is with new technology which doesn't fit our prior experiences and skills. And so how can we shift rapidly to new technology that's going to address the challenges that we currently have? And the implications of not transitioning to next generation e-commerce are pretty staggering because if you're a brand that's not getting the digital sort of branding that you need, having that impact, that experience for your customers, you're going to start falling behind. Not unlike companies that didn't move to next generation platforms and other aspects of business. So ERP, product lifecycle management, product data management, customer relationship management. These things were sort of nice to haves a decade or 2 decades ago. They are an absolute competitive necessity today. And getting that next generation e-commerce platform, which is a big job, needs to be done to be able to have the table stakes to participate in the modern economy. Digital offerings rapidly look stale if built on an inflexible platform, and this particularly affects premium brands, especially because of customers' high expectations. On the other side, if you make your platform too flexible, then there's a huge expense. And how do you get to market fast? There's like an interesting trade-off there, but it can be solved. There's actually a way to address that. You end up with stalled growth, and if you have stalled growth because you're not executing in your digital channels, then what happens is you start having reactive corporate strategies because you're trying to adjust the business reality, but you're not impacting the whole customer experience as you could have been if you had the right next generation e-commerce platform in place with the right processes to support it. And then new competitors segment the market and steal customers with differentiated digital offerings. And so, we've talked about what the situation is, what some of the challenges are. So what are the requirements, really? What do you really need? What does your next generation platform and process have to address? And if it's not addressing this, you have a cliff coming up in terms of your ability to engage. And so you need to be everywhere. That's a given. You can't go to a retail show without saying omnichannel on every single wall and poster. It's actually a bit ridiculous, but it's true. You need to be everywhere. You need to be touching your customers where they are, and that's in the store. It's where they are. It's social media, and it's their phones. It needs to be personal. The last two are really important. It has to be fast. If you can't move quickly, you're not going to be able to impact the experience of your customer. That's the bottom line. You can't plan this out. I think fast fashion is the greatest example of that. Lean manufacturing, the Toyota production system, another great example of that. If you can't shorten cycle time, you can't impact customer experience in a meaningful way. You think you are just because everyone else is doing it the same way. Everyone is an 18-month planning cycle, and then it just becomes random hit or miss. But the companies that can shorten that cycle time, they have a massive advantage over other customers in other companies in the field. And then you need to be unique. You need to be able to create the right brand experience for different business units. And so you want to achieve all these things. You want to be omnichannel. You want to be personalized. You want to respond fast. And then on top of that, you want to do it in the way that your business unit needs to do, the brand needs to do. How do you address that? It's complexity layered upon complexity. So there is a solution, and this is really where the web has come, the technical requirements for next generation e-commerce. You need to separate the customer experience from the transactional backend. That's the #1 thing. If you can tweak your customer experience, test your customer experience, modify it, deploy it, do the A and the B version and test it. If you need to be able to create personalized sort of versions of it for different users and different segments. That's really hard to do if you're doing that and it's all intertwined with the transactional backend. There's too much coupling. Thankfully, you can do this now. You can separate the customer experience from the transactional backend. And we'll talk about that in a couple of slides. Mobile first. I mean, that's a given, but people still really don't think about that. They say mobile first, but they're not doing mobile and web and everything at the same time. They're still doing it as a sort of a planned sort of additional feature. You need to have mobile work perfectly everywhere, and again, more complexity. It needs to be fast, high responsiveness. You need to be cross-platform. So now this starts talking about cycle time and speed. If you have 5 or 6 code bases to address how you interact with your customer digitally, you have a world of operational complexity that's not going to make you be fast, that's not going to allow you to tweak, not allow you to respond, shorten your cycle time. And so there's the business value of a single code base or fewer code bases is massive if you can achieve your business objectives with it. Then everything needs to be secure, it needs to be integrated, you want to have that 360 view of the client, you need to have really strong content strategies and be able to adapt that. Separating your digital and content strategies can be extremely powerful, and then you need to be global. So these are sort of the base requirements. So the thing that really informs this strategy is what's happened in the web. And so at around 2013, that's when single page applications with HTML5, lean startup processes, everything came together to give the right platform and the right process for really growth hacking, brand hacking, getting the customer experience, building omnichannel applications. This is only like 4 years ago, but before this, this was really not easy to do. And so you have now browsers that are so good, you can cut the cord to the server, create the customer experience in the browser. That allows you to start addressing omnichannel, mobile first, and do all of this without getting tangled up in the back-end transactions. And so we're now in the second generation of this kind of an architecture. It's been well proven, it's been used by all the banks and insurance companies, and retailers are starting to move to it. Retail systems are more complex in a lot of respects, so it's really emerging now, and the early adopters have been getting great results. And we'll talk about why and how this works. So when you separate the front end and the back end, you enable creative teams to launch new experience and innovations quickly. So you can have a need for a new product that you're launching, and you can update the customer experience, and you're not touching a single thing in your back-end systems. There's no need to do penetration testing. There's no need to do deep security audits. There's no need to deploy things that are going to take down your other sites. You just create a new experience that taps the same processes as all your other experiences, but it's all in the front end. And so it's just another client touching your systems. You can see the results now. They're direct and they're measurable. So when you have a strategy and you can execute that in weeks or months instead of years, you can now fine-tune and adapt your strategy. That cycle time is so important. You now get deep loyalty through strong differentiation. A great way of thinking about this is what companies have learned, retailers have learned about store design, and customers return visits to a store and the year-over-year sales growths. If you can create new differentiated experiences through your store design and your product assortment, then you can keep users engaged and excited, and that also applies to digital, but we've never been able to address that because of the logistical challenges. Just like really effective store design and merchandising strategies have emerged in the last 15 years based upon our ability to execute supply chain strategies, our ability to execute our digital supply chain strategies for building our e-commerce solutions have that same impact. We can respond rapidly to competitors and disruptors. We can experiment to respond and try something with a small segment of our customers. We can geofence, where people see different experiences if we want to test in the market. We can test an e-commerce experience on the West Coast. There's so many things you can do. And then finally, this is actually not the most important thing, but it's a huge benefit. This dramatically reduces costs due to simplified processes and tech stack. When you want to make changes, it's so much easier. And so next generation e-commerce solutions. The key principles are you're going to split your tech stack, customer experience on the front end and the transaction platform on the back end. The great thing about this is your back end already exists in a lot of cases. You can leverage a lot of your IT investment and you can build new front end experiences on top of that. You can promote radical innovation by applying a build, measure, learn cycle. You can structure your organization around a continuous delivery software development model. And then you can apply lean design and software delivery practices to reduce cycle time, limit work in progress, simplify your operations, and get a lot more value delivered quickly. The big challenge with this, and this has historically been the case, is that a lot of the continuous delivery and the lean agile processes have been centered only to the development team. And there's a lot of things that start to need adjustment when you do this in a company. You have to change your strategic planning and take into account the shorter delivery time. You have to take into account the governance model, like how do you manage projects, how do you get feedback on projects, how do you replan projects. And you have to think about getting stuff done in smaller chunks, because that way you get the value immediately, you can learn, and then you can move on to your next project. So rather than doing monolithic projects that take a long time, you want to get your projects down to probably maximum, say, 6 to 9 months for some big projects, and other projects down around the 3 to 4 month period. And if you can decompose your e-commerce strategy into, say, an initial 9-month project and multiple, 2 to 4 month projects, then this gives you the ability to really drive value, drive customer experience, and streamline your internal processes. And that's where we start looking at lean agile across the organization. So strategy, design, delivery. These lean philosophies have to span all organizational processes. One way of doing this is as you're delivering and you're working on a lean agile delivery process with strong DevOps and strong continuous delivery, apply design thinking and service design to start solving the touch points outside of the organization. You can't put everyone on one team. So how do you handle compliance? That's a big thing. How do you handle legal? How do you handle change management? How do you measure value? How do you sort of communicate progress? All these things need to change to really enable a lean agile e-commerce strategy. And the foundation of that is the continuous delivery of high quality customer experiences following a build, measure, learn process. You're planning and managing against working software, and you're getting the entire life cycle involved, from users with user validation all the way up through corporate governance. Traditionally, what happens is we do the whole corporate governance and planning, we do the product strategy, we do the design. Now we start doing delivery, and anything that we learn from the users is completely, you can't respond to it. There's nothing you can do, because the process is for going back through that process and having another strategy conversation, having another planning conversation. It's such an expensive, difficult thing to do in a traditional model, because people try to do too much of it up front. But when you break it down to smaller pieces, this can run fluidly. You can be running a 3-month project, or you can be doing a 1-month or a 1-week engagement or process. And the fact is, when you can get that feedback and talk about it and make changes, everything runs a lot better, and the cost of change gets reduced significantly. And so the difference is quite stunning. When you think about how does this feel when you're doing e-commerce deployment. Once you get to working software and you use a lean agile process, instead of waiting months and trying to deploy the back end with the front end and having that sort of all hands white knuckle deployment after weeks of testing that still didn't catch everything and things are still breaking, and there's no feedback loop when you learn things and someone has ideas or users give feedback, it's so hard to get this done in the first place. Going back through that process is really untenable. So you just leave everything for the next rewrite 5 years from now. In a lean process, you deploy in days with no or minimal back-end logic. And so you can make changes, add a new flow, reverse the flow, change your checkout logic. You can do that and deploy, and you can do it quickly. Because it's so easy to deploy, you can now start testing with 1 or 2% of your users, 5% of your users, a different region. You can merge design with development, adapting quickly to emerging customer needs, because change is cheap. If somebody sees the deployed software and says, well, that design doesn't quite do what I'd hoped, you can make a change to it, do the design fix, apply it, deploy it, and you're cutting out so much cost. It's way cheaper than trying to get everything right up front. Plus, you're actually getting users to participate in design. Your developers are engaged, the designers, everybody's talking, and everybody's really looking at the real customer experience. Testing is done throughout the development cycle. Bugs are found there. QA becomes a lot simpler. When you're deploying something that you've been working on for 4 days, there's not a lot of testing that has to be done, especially if you're not changing back-end transactions. You can go to a continuous delivery model, have good rollback, test with smaller percentage of users. There's so many optimizations to the process that remove so much pain that the value and the improvement in customer experience is quite stunning. You can test with real users. real users with real data are just radically different than what you get in using paper prototypes and even clickable prototypes. Real users with real data in a real scenario, that's where you really get the deep learnings that should drive your customer experience choices. I can't emphasize that enough. It's so hard to do in traditional models. We try to do it up front. We have focus groups. We do little prototypes. We test it with a few users who are not really the sort of the cohort or segment we're trying to address, and then we don't have the ability to incrementally improve that. And then finally, analytics built deep into the process and user feedback inform future development. The problem with analytics today is that you can tweak a little bit based upon things, but you can't really learn from it because you don't have the ability to build something. You're doing the analytics and it's like, hey, let's move this a little bit. Let's change the copy. Let's do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But saying, hey, what if we change the checkout flow and don't ask them to sign up until page 3? Or what if we have single button sort of login or other things that are really hard to validate without running on a live system with lots of users. And those provide a lot of the value. And even taking risk, that's one of the areas that's actually not really talked about often, because we're always talking about efficiency and we're trying to sell on efficiency. But the most important thing probably is lean agile processes allow you to take risks and do stuff that are really cool, really interesting. And you can do that with 1 or 2% of your users and see if there is something that could really, really move the needle. If you've got to guess and try to move the needle significantly and do that 12 months ahead of time and make sure and be right, or things are going to not go well, you're not going to take risks and you're going to have a fairly tepid passive engagement from a design and a risk-taking perspective. So being able to embrace risky things without the risk of trying them offers a lot of value from a learning perspective. And so that brings to, there's all kinds of challenges when you try to do this, and we've been doing this for 3.5 years. It's amazing that everything works well in the happy path if everything works and you go through once. But how do you handle change? And what are the different types of design? So the way we like to define it is you have your discovery, definition, you develop, and you deliver, but that's only at the high level. So your early discovery is where you have a lot of divergence, and you're working on the problem space, and you're trying to think of different things. How can we do this different? We want problem insight. We want users insight. We want to identify customer needs, clarify the problems. Then you want to move into exploring solutions and determine how to provide the highest value. But not be scared to actually do it. Get close enough that you're 80% of the way there. Now you can develop, deliver, and you have that convergence, you have the user, you've shipped it, and now you're doing this loop on that second triangle where you're looping back and forth and you're getting the most value because you did enough of the planning to sort of take the problem space and get very close to the ideal solution space, and now you're solving the problems around there. And so that brings us to what does this mean? Like, what actually is this about? And this is your next generation e-commerce application structure, where you've separated the back end and the front end. You have your stable core IT services that are presented through a REST API. You have an integration layer that also provides the payment systems, the CMS, and now you're building web components and higher level front end technologies to allow you to rapidly build your customer experience layer. Whether it's a mobile app with React Native, Brand A's web experience, Brand B's web experience, Brand C's, you can now use this stack and you can change, test, take risks, and really drive the next generation of customer experience, and you can do it a lot faster at a lot lower cost with a lot more flexibility. And so you don't have to get paralyzed by the planning and governance and the negotiations and the risk management and the all that kind of stuff. And it ends up looking like this. You have your customer experience and you have your transactional platform, and this separation enabled by HTML5, React, is what is going to drive the winning digital experiences over the next 5 years. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Doug.
Great, thanks, Nick. That was awesome. It's interesting. So, it is important to choose a technology stack and architecture that enables agile product development. Technologies like React are built around the idea of separation of concern. So, meaning there's, not that tight coupling between the components in a user interface, but also between, like Nick said, between the back end and the front end. In the retail space, as we've talked about, previously, it's essential to meet that goal of rapidly adapting to customer change. And by separating those concerns out within the user interface framework using React, as well as from the back end, that's more digital value that you can provide to your customers. If you have testable components that are small and easy to change, it's going to be much more rapid way of actually making those changes and getting them deployed out to the end customer. This is a really interesting quote. So Nick and I had the good fortune to be at NRF, the big retail conference in New York this week. And so agile development is the goal, or is not the goal, sorry. It is, the goal is agile products. So the CTO of Tesco out of the UK, said this. And he's right. Having React as part of your technology stack that supports your products can help make the development part easy, so you can focus on things that are providing value to the customer. So, like Nick said earlier, it's not just an IT thing. It is actually an entire organizational challenge that needs to be faced, where you have different disciplines that are working together towards a common goal of making the product better. And React is really good at doing that, again, because of its separation of concerns, its component-based architecture, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So in changing that point of view can really help make retailers more successful in the digital space. So what is this React thing? I've said React about 5 times, but some of you might not know. So what is React? So it's built by Facebook and used by some of the best and high traffic omnichannel experiences in the world. Facebook is one of the highest traffic websites and mobile apps that there is. The challenge they faced was really to very quickly serve content to users across desktop, across the native experiences as well, and then they have like there's a messenger, all kinds of stuff that they were looking to do. They also really famously 5 years ago moved away actually from HTML and native using Cordova. And we're going to talk a little bit about their solution to that, which also involves React. So Facebook built this, basically to serve their needs, and then open sourced it for the rest of us to use. And there's some pretty big, brands and pretty good experiences that are out there that have actually adopted React. So when we look at who they are, Airbnb, of course, Instagram, which is now part of the Facebook ecosystem, is all React. We have Uber, we have Netflix, and of course, any retailers on the call here will definitely recognize Walmart as one as well. Here at Rangle, about 50% of our projects are done in React. The other half are in AngularJS. But definitely retailers, they lean towards React because of some of the things that we have been talking about and some of the benefits that I'm going to show you in a bit. One of those examples is one of our current clients, Aldo. So this is another interesting quote again from NRF that was fresh in my mind, so I thought I'd put it in here for you. Use the least number of technologies to provide the highest level of value. So that was the CTO of a company called Teradata, and that was again at the NRF conference this week. So why does React exist? So imagine the omnichannel environment. You have iOS, and you're coding everything in Swift. You have Android, which everybody's going to need to develop in Java. Then you have, back-end services, and that could be a plethora of things. It could be .NET, it could be Java as well, for these unified web services. Then, of course, you have, the web experience, mobile web and desktop web using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So if you're doing different technologies, different approaches, different design patterns across all those different channels, you're going to have an efficiency problem for sure. And like Nick said earlier, you're not going to be able to move very quickly. So unifying and reducing the number of technologies that you're using will help you to provide better value. And that's one of the, really for React and React Native, which we're going to talk about, that's really one of the key benefits of it. So utilizing React as your user experience development framework provides that high value across all those digital channels. React is modular and extremely testable, which makes it extremely resilient and easy to use. It allows developers to create a very clean application structure, and it does this, again, using that very highly reusable component model. Components are constructed with the ability to work anywhere. They really don't know. So say we have, say, a button. They don't know anything about the world outside of them. Nor do they have any baked-in functionality. So if you have a button that we create for checkout, for example, we're able to reuse that button across, an entire web experience or mobile experience fairly easily, because we're actually injecting that information, that what it says, what it does, all that fun stuff into it. So from a UI perspective, we now have a button that we can use over and over and over and gain efficiency. And really, that's the holy grail of developing a UI system that, can enable rapid ongoing development in the retail space, allow you to make changes, and can be adaptable to really any situation that you want to throw at it. The other aspect that you'll often hear thrown around with React is the concept, or it's a library called Redux. Redux allows you to store the application state, or its data, if you will, to be managed centrally. So that means that those components that we're using in React can be assured not to know anything about the data that they're dealing with. And again, this makes it extremely reusable for all the different UI and layouts that we're going to be creating with React. It also enables some really cool features, like being able to play back all the user actions that a user has taken automatically, as well as capture behavior-driven analytics almost automatically. Actually, Rangle has developed some open source software to help React Redux developers do this, and it's very successful. So we've talked a lot about React, and you've probably heard me mention a couple times about React Native. So there's kind of two aspects that when we're talking about omnichannel to React. React itself was originally built with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for the web in mind. And I think it was about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, Facebook released React Native. And what React Native is actually very different from the predecessors that came before it. You probably remember me saying, Mark Zuckerberg said in 2012, that going with Cordova for Facebook was a mistake. But they still needed to gain these type of efficiencies. Facebook is famous for moving very quickly and really working hard to get the right experience quickly out to the user. So what they did was actually invent a solution that uses JavaScript. It's powered by JavaScript, but it's actually using native components. So native buttons, native views, native images, etc. And that differs from the previous solution that was using basically a web browser to manage the user experience, etc. So what this allows for is two things. First of all, you can get up to 70% code usage from that Redux side and some of that layout side if you structure your application correctly. So you can have your web experience code. You can actually port part of that over to the native side. The other interesting thing that you can do, because these components are built natively, and I'm actually going to show you some code in a little bit here and actually show you a React Native app working on both iOS and Android. I put this one together in about 10 minutes or so you can see just how fast we can develop these things. And again, because we're significantly reducing the costs and time to market. So with that said, I'm going to switch screens here. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. This is a little bit of code. For those of you who don't understand code, that's okay. I'm not going to go too deep into it. This is really about just showing you that we have some shared components. It's fairly easy to actually understand well, for me anyway, I'm a programmer, what's happening here. But I'll just highlight a couple of things. So we can see here we have a tag, JSX tag, which is the language that React uses to define its layout, define its view. So in this case, we're creating a header for an application, and you'll be able to see what that header looks like in a second. But you'll note that this isn't an HTML tag. It doesn't say H1 like a traditional React application would do. It's actually using a view tag. And what that means in the React Native world is that this is actually a native view, just like you would have if you were doing Swift or if you're doing Objective-C or Java. And then we have text as well. So we have a text tag that's basically the equivalent of a label on iOS or Android. And then we're using styles that are very familiar to web developers. We have background color, height, padding, etc. All these things are very familiar to web developers, but this is actually manipulating native components, which is very powerful because you don't have to have a completely separate skill set to be able to build mobile applications efficiently. And here's a button just as another example. So there's some code here. I have a couple of styles that are happening. And again, this is really meant, just to showcase, that we're using native components with JavaScript and gaining that efficiency. So without going too deep into that stuff, I'm going to flip over to the next screen here, and hopefully the demo gods are on my side today. Every time I type something in real time, it might break, but we'll just have to go with that chance. So on my screen here, I just have a terminal on the left. In the middle, I have the iOS simulator, and on the right I have the Android simulator. So that code base we were looking at is going to actually build a native application for both iOS and Android. So let me just get started here. Let's do iOS first. So let's take a second. It's going to go through. It's actually building the application, compiling it into parts of it into Swift and moving JavaScript over as well. And there we can see we have Taylor Swift. So what this app does is actually all the Taylor Swift albums. The guys downstairs asked me to do this one. So I built this in about 10 minutes. It uses a web service that basically pulls in the Taylor Swift albums. And then what we're doing, again, it's a simple example. When you click Buy Now, it actually links out to Amazon, opens the web browser, and you can go buy. So again, built that in about 10 minutes. The real magic, though, that I want to show you is because I'm going to run a command here. So React Native run Android. So we saw that same experience. It'll just take a second. And there we have Taylor Swift as well. So you can see the look and feel of the application is identical to what it was on iOS. We were able to build single-use components that were used across both platforms. And again, when we look at some of the layout code, it would be very easy to actually move that over into the web as well, just by replacing that 30%, those small reusable components from the native code over into HTML. There's actually also libraries out there that allow you to write your native code first, so take a mobile first approach, and then actually it'll help translate that native code over into HTML for you as well. So that's React Native, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end. If there's any questions about that, I'll try to answer them for you. So what are the key benefits for retailers? So React is a single omnichannel solution. It allows retailers to adapt quickly to the changing customer needs more efficiently than really any other traditional option that there is out there. Imagine a world where you can roll out changes to the website and the mobile app the same day you decide to make that change and see what the user reactions are. And that's absolutely possible with React and React Native. We make changes like that to our customers' code all the time, and as a retailer, that's a really big benefit, and probably one of the biggest that you can get with React. But you have to take the right approach to developing your product. So what are some other key benefits? So it is really extremely fast to build new UI. As I said, it took me about 10 or 20 minutes to build that app that I really quickly demoed for you. It's interesting. So React has extremely fast screen rendering because anytime something changes, so we think about our Taylor Swift example. If I wanted to have a detailed view of our product landing page of that album, it would be very fast for me to just swap out only the things that have changed, because React doesn't repaint the whole screen. It actually only repaints the things that are important to be changing. So when your users are using this app, it's going to be extremely fast and extremely efficient in getting them what they're looking for. You can safely make changes without breaking the site because we have those small components. It's very fast to get those changes out there, like Nick said, and you can start to take more of the risk without having as high risk of breaking things. And again, built correctly, it can be mere hours to go from ideation to deployment. Oops. So omnichannel, we talked about that a whole bunch. So it's a single UI platform. The other interesting thing, with this technology is that it doesn't apply just to, we've talked about mobile and web, but also to desktop. There's technology that allows us to actually deploy to kiosks as well. So if you're using, a Windows or an iOS kiosk, it would be quite easy to actually develop using those same components onto your kiosks as well. So the in-store experience, which is going to be different from the mobile experience or the website experience, can also leverage a lot of that same code and efficiency, and then we can have basically a really truly omni-channel experience out there. Again, because we're using React. Again, it's component driven. So the component library is really at the core of a React project. When we talk about React, there isn't a lot of API to it, or application programming interface. The code that we're interacting with, the API is very small. It fits into a couple pages if you print it out. Really, the power is in allowing you to create these components that are reusable, fluid, and consistent, so you can very quickly spin up these experiences. And a lot of our clients, when we're working with them, develop these component libraries and start to use them across other brands. So it becomes easy to create white label solutions, or if there's multiple brands under the same retailer, being able to do that as well. SEO is really important especially for e-commerce. Getting that natural search. Traditionally, JavaScript applications have had a problem because Google can't read JavaScript. It can only read HTML and CSS. So when we're looking on the website, having good SEO is key to having a good e-commerce experience. And React has a really great solution for that. It's called isomorphic React. It's a really fancy word, just meaning server side. And what happens is when Google or even when your customers first land on the site, it actually renders out that HTML. So instead of getting JavaScript, downloading it, and then the browser doing the work, that first initial page is actually rendered on the server side, delivered, and then we go into our single application experience. And that's that's an essential thing for any e-commerce, and again, another really great benefit of using React. And again, that lightning fast interface. So we're only re-rendering small areas of the screen when data changes. So we're very quickly able to change screens, and it's really one of the most sought after kind of things when we're building any interface, and React makes it dead simple. There's really nothing that the developer has to do. It just kind of automatically does things as long as you're setting up the application properly. The last thing is easy analytics. I mentioned it a little bit before. So React and Redux, React with Redux state management makes that behavior-based data collection much easier to implement. Behavior-based data, again, we were just at NRF, and that was what a lot of people were talking about, is instead of trying to collect all the things, collect the important information about the behavior that the users are taking. And what Redux does very well is collect actions that users are taking and the resulting data from that. And so what we do here at Rangle and other companies do as well is use that Redux data store to actually collect analytics, put it into whatever your analytics solution is, whether it's Adobe or whether it's Google or whatever. But there's not a lot of coding that has to happen behind the scenes to do that, because we're already collecting that information for the application. It then becomes about passing it off to the reporting solution. So the result, React, it's going to allow you to adapt quickly to changes in customer behavior, quickly develop iOS and Android and in-store mobile experiences or kiosk experiences, create flexible user interfaces that are highly personalizable, and be agile about how you deliver digital projects to customers. So a little bit about how Rangle helps and what we do. We talked about Nick and I, but we have 80 plus projects that we've done. We have over 100 developers and designers that work exclusively with JavaScript and modern web technologies. It says 150. I think it's actually more like 160 as of this week. So again, we do work in Angular and with React, and we love them both. So we often our customers will come to us and talk about, we're trying to make that kind of decision. We're looking to go to a single page application. Can you help us figure it out? So we can definitely help you decide which technology is right for you. So again, our focus is on that front end technology, and like Nick talked about, to some detail, is the that lean UX practice. Really, getting really short cycle times down, getting products in front of the customer very quickly, and getting into that build, measure, learn cycle as fast as we can. And really, what that means for those who aren't familiar with the term, we have build, measure, learn, meaning that we quickly onboard a design. So we build something that we're looking to test out, whether it's button placements in an existing app, or we're starting with an MVP of an e-commerce site. We get that in front of users, whether that's a small test group or out into production, as fast as we can, and we collect that data. So again, looking back at React, it's very easy for us to collect user behavior and put it into our reporting solution. So build something quickly, really quickly, get the measurements of how things are performing, learn from that data, and decide what we're going to build next. And so when you get into this really tight cycle of building, measuring what the results of that are, learning from it, and then building again, you can very quickly build the right solution, as opposed to trying to plan 6 months ahead, trying to figure out what users are going to think based on what you're thinking in a boardroom, versus actually putting working software in front of somebody. So we're big proponents of this system, and we found it works extremely well, especially in the retail space. A couple of our services, so you can create we have project teams. They'll create your web application for you. We can help you transform your process. A lot of what Nick was talking about, it sounds great, but what are the first steps? How do we get there? As an organization, what steps do we need to take? And we help a lot of our clients to do that. Both on the development side and on the business side as well. We have clients that come to us and they'll talk about tech stacks. So they might be using a legacy system or a kind of a more monolithic, older web application. And so how do we get over into this decoupled front end and back end, et cetera, using React? So again, we'll help you figure that out. Building mobile apps. We do training as well. And I believe next month we have a React for Developers webinar coming up that we'd love you to join if you're interested in code. And again, we have an analytics practice as well. A couple of our clients, you can see, we definitely have a lot of experience with retail, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you about anything that you would have as well. So that's the slides we have for today. Again, that was the first half was Nick Van Riedenberg, our CEO, and I'm Doug Riches, Director of Solutions Architecture. If we have some time, we can try to answer some questions in the next 10 minutes, if there are any. Switch over here and see if we've got some questions. Okay, so it says on slide 18, the browser item says web components used. However, web components not very regularly used with React, although it can be. What are your thoughts on web components and React together? On both Angular and React, we've used kind of regular web components. Most of the time, we go towards just using React components, using the React library, or with Angular, we'll use the Angular components. It just works much better with the system, and it's much easier for new developers to understand what's happening if we stay with the kind of existing API. By kiosk, so the next question is, by kiosk, do you mean using React for a kiosk terminal versus React Native for mobile? So yes, so by kiosk, I mean if you walk into the store and there might be an inventory touch screen that's set up for users to interact with, possibly alongside an associate, or for them to work by themselves. But our client Aldo actually has a really great setup for that. You walk in and you can actually search for your shoes, etc. in there. So yeah, absolutely, you can use React to build that experience, and as well there are libraries for React Native that allow you to deploy to OS 10. So if React is better for retailers, in what cases is Angular 2 better than React? Do my developers need experience with, well, I think this is a two-part question. So if React is better for retailers, in what cases to Angular 2 is it greater than React? That's a really good question, and we get that question a lot. And I wouldn't say that one is necessarily better than the other. I think it's more about the approach that you want to take to development. So you have to remember that React is a UI framework. It's extremely small, and then you add in the parts that you need. Whereas Angular is more of a full-fledged solution. It uses TypeScript versus JavaScript. But as far as using it using it for retailers, both would give you the same user experience in the end, the same effect. It really comes down to how do you want to use your development tools? What is your team makeup? How large is your team? These are all considerations that we do. And if you want to have a call, give us a call. We'd be happy to walk you through some of those considerations as well. I love talking about this stuff at length. So the other question we have here is, do my developers need experience with iOS, Android, native UI to effectively use React Native? How much of the conversion to native UI is automated, provided, built in? So it can definitely help understanding specifically iOS. When Facebook built React Native, a lot of the JSX components, that's the things that define the layout, were built around names that were used in iOS. So if you're familiar with those names, it makes it easier. But you don't necessarily have to know the native. You don't need to know Swift or Java necessarily. The only case where that would come in is if you're building something very specialized. So you're building like a plugin for the camera where it's going to interact with native code. You still write native code to do those types of things to some extent, although there is a significant portion that would be in JavaScript as well. That could be a whole webinar in itself right there, that question. So again, if you have more further questions about it, happy to jump on a call and or email me or Twitter, and happy to answer those. We have another question here. What percentage of the work for a typical project goes to reusable components, and how much work goes into making the component native? Typical percentage of the work. That's a hard question to answer. Components really are the core of what you're doing with React. You're building state with Redux, but I'd say there's a significant portion of the time that goes into creating those components. With that said, if you're moving between kind of React Native, those native components, and HTML components for the web, it's about so you can probably reuse about 70% of your code as long as you plan effectively ahead of time. That's the caveat. Meaning that you have to plan for swapping out different style sheets, etc. having some configuration options in your application that will allow it to be deployed to multiple places. Hopefully that answered that question. When would you advise building web experience first and then mobile, and when the other way around? That's really a business decision. It can vary between clients. It depends on what you're trying to do. So, mobile's an interesting beast. When you think about a website, it might be less frequently used. If you have like a loyalty program, for example, a mobile application, where somebody's going to be using it a lot or getting points or getting discounts via or coupons or something via it. That's going to be something that would lend itself much better to a mobile app that they can use in store, maybe with low connectivity kind of situations, versus having a website that they need to go to, and at the back of the store they can't get any signal or Wi-Fi. So there's different business reasons that you would make that decision. And again, if you have a specific case, please give us a call. We can talk to you about those things. What are the best analytics tools to use with React? I don't think the tools necessarily matter. They all work equally well. We do have an analytics department here that, if you wanted to get into specifics on that, again, we can set up a call for that. Really, we decouple everything when we're using React. We decouple components from each other, from front end and back end, and we would try to do the same for the analytics solution. So you could potentially be using multiples, or you could be using just one, or be able to switch between them. Okay, I have a couple more minutes for a couple more questions. So what is the 30% code that has to be rewritten for web? So the 30% between React Native and React is those reusable, I call them dumb components. So when we're not the layout necessarily, we would define components, and I'm still sharing my screen here, I think, so I might be able to show you here. So here we have a layout component. So we have card and card item. Card and card item are components that I've defined. So in this case, if I redefined a different, HTML version of card, or a different version of card item, in HTML, that would be the 30% that I would be doing. So this, album detail that I'm looking at here, we could reuse that as long as we redefine what card and card item are. So that's the 30%. It's really taking it from those native components over into HTML. With that said, there is a library out there that can help you, if you've done the native experience first, can help you kind of transition it over to the web. Okay, I like this question. Can you explain what role unit tests play in providing an agile experience for you and your clients? What kind of coverage do you aim for? So we aim for about 90%-ish. It depends per project. Unit tests are probably the most important type of testing you can do, especially in a component-based system, but really across anything. And the reason for that is, if you're relying on end-to-end tests, which is where you start testing, like go log in, do X, Y, Z. There's a large library of tests that you have to do to test everything that's happening in an application. And they very quickly get out of date, especially if you're moving quickly. So we always aim for a very high level of testing and testability in the components as well. And then really that's our key indicator of quality of the product, is really those unit tests first, with backing up end-to-end tests that follow up with that. Again, 90% is usually the average for our projects that we would aim for. Where do I get info on the React for Devs course? I believe it's on our website, and I maybe ask Emerita to post it into the chat channel just before we're done here. But absolutely, so our website has this information, but she's going to post it into the chat for us. Is React Native stable for a production app? Absolutely. So if you've ever used Instagram, that's written in React Native. It's a pretty popular app. I use it all the time. So absolutely. Lots of retailers are using it, but If you've ever used Uber, Lyft uses it, Airbnb, React Native is absolutely stable for production apps. We have a couple of apps that we've built for clients, and they're out there and they're working really well. So again, it's tried, tested, and true by Facebook first, and then they open sourced it. So I trust it, and I don't say that lightly. So what's the best way to develop on React Native to have a high amount of reusable code between iOS and Android? Well, that actually comes out of the box. So there are a couple of, if you look at the documentation for iOS, for React Native, there are a couple. There's an iOS specific, UI piece, or an Android specific UI piece. But for the most part, there's also like a component that will do both things. So it might be iOS header, Android header, or header that works on both. And there's only really kind of edge cases where you would use the iOS or Android specific ones. For the most part, the code you're writing, the JSX you're writing, is reusable across both. So that, this code I showed you here, the only difference I have is actually it's exactly the same code in my index Android and my iOS Android. Now that said, I could potentially have it so the experience and the components that I build for Android and iOS are completely different too. I have that option, but for the most part, you're reusing components. So that's really kind of the goal. Which library for React Native to Web? I believe it's actually called React-Native-Web. There was a talk by Dan Abramoff at React Europe in 2016, just last summer, and he mentioned it, and I checked it out. It's a fantastic little piece of code. I believe that's its name. It's React Native Web or React Web Native, but I'm pretty sure it's React Native Web. And so if you just search on GitHub, you should be able to find that. So do you have any strategies for reusing code beyond React components, Redux actions, reducer handlers, etc.? Yeah, I think I can try and mumble through this one, but I think really that next webinar that we're doing next month, they're going to address that better, because they really talk about reusability and Redux much better than I can, and we're 3 minutes over, but than I can right now. But really the strategy is really just thinking about, like, how just like for the components, how am I making this reusable? Am I tying my application to something on the web or in native? And if your answer is yes to that, find some way to abstract it out so that you can have a configuration change across both. You have the same problem with styles as well, so that can be problematic. What is a good place to find all the components for React Native? So if you just search for React Native, the React Native website has a really great list of all the components that you can use that are out of the box. Really, it kind of mirrors what iOS and Android have as their default components. The one that's missing from there, which I always find hilarious, is button. I actually had to, as you see here on the screen, I had to actually create my own button. I never quite got that, but I'm sure there's a reason. So yeah, button really is the only thing that's not there. But if you go to the React Native website on the left-hand side, it'll show you all the pre-built. They call them primitive components, and then there's you just build your own out of that. Again, React and React Native aren't huge libraries. They're not entire solutions. It's enabling you to make these solutions yourself. And I think that's the end of the questions. So I want to thank everybody for attending today. Hopefully it was useful. And if you have any questions, again, our contact information, I'll just throw it back up on the screen here. So I'm Doug Riches, and that was Nick Van Rudenberg. You can see our Twitter handles here and the contact information for Rangle. So if you have any questions beyond that, we'd be more than happy to jump on a call and talk to you about them. Thank you very much.